we record on Fridays, and it is Friday the 13th, talking about Psycho.
Yeah, we got to talk about Psycho on Friday the 13th. We didn't talk about Friday the 13th on Friday the 13th. What are we doing?
Yeah, I realized...
Why didn't we do that?
I realized that today. I'm like, we could have done Friday the 13th, but we did just do Halloween. And that seems like too many similar films in a short period of time.
Are you trying to tell me that this film and Halloween aren't inextricably connected through Janet Leigh, who is the mother of Jamie Lee Curtis, and also the way that he uses a butcher knife as his primary means of killing people, and also the exact way that he stabs into people with said knife by holding it weirdly above his head with his arms slightly bent?
Hold on, though, because I think it's more of the classification of the movie. This feels completely different than Halloween.
Oh, for
Halloween
sure.
has so many homages to or it is an homage to this movie. Halloween's a slasher movie. This one is not a slasher.
No, this is a thriller. This is a thriller horror. This is a nice slow burn.
Right. There will be a Friday the 13th next year.
Yeah.
There's one every year, at least.
We'll find one. We'll make. If you know what, if we don't get one, we'll make our own.
We'll make our own. If you can't make your own, store-bought's fine.
Yeah. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach.
And today we're going to be taking a look at the number one film of all time, Alfred Hitchcock's Psycho from 1960. This film has probably been on everyone's number one movie to see list for decades upon decades, and it still holds up, don't you think?
Yeah, for the most part.
Yeah, I would say that a lot of the things that are outdated about it, specifically, would be the stuff at the end, which I think it would be good to just get out of the way now. The use of transvestitism to describe Norman Bates in that way overdrawn, extended psychiatric scene at the end, which is just supposed to be like, and now we're going to talk about Norman, who dresses up as a woman because his mother is a competing personality inside of his head. And it's just like, this is unnecessary to do. Yeah. I think that everybody got it.
I think that, because that was, what was it? Murder on the Orient Express was like the reveal, and it's like this procedural reveal of here's everything that was happening like outside of your knowledge as the viewer, and it's like they're pulling back the curtain, and it's almost like they do that in like some Twilight Zone episodes too, where it's like here are the inner workings of our main plot point.
Yeah, but honestly, if Rod Serling had done this psychiatric evaluation, I totally would have been cool with it, because he's just got the cadence that's like, yes, tell me these things I already know.
Just the voiceover.
Yeah, it's so eloquent, and it's like butter, and it's just like, yes, this is the material that I wanted.
Aside from that, I mean, it just seemed a little bit like forced because of that, but also the transvestite thing that they bring up. The one guy goes, "Oh, so he's a transvestite because he dressed up like his mother," and then the doctor, the psychiatrist, he goes, "No,
because he's not getting a sexual gratification from it, so they don't consider it."
Right, and so that's offensive to be short, but also it shows the lack of understanding in the writing there, and they didn't even have to bring up the transvestite thing, because they made a point of that not being what it was. It was psychosis.
I think that part of the reason that they have that scene at all is so that they can rebuke that question specifically. This is sort of their way of jumping in front of the bullet and being like, no. This is a different thing. This is an element of psychosis. That's not the statement we were trying to make.
And they did try to explain it away by saying that, he's not getting sexual gratification out of it. But it's in saying that they kind of
imply
ran into a different bullet.
Right.
So,
right.
Yeah, it's just, it's outdated, but also like it wasn't like wrong. They're just ignorant.
Yeah, but
I guess.
Also, I mean, at the time, it was still a part of that like way of thinking about gender and sexuality. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It was still part of the vernacular used to describe men who had in really was more fetishistic than it was being an issue of being trans, as far as that would go, because you look at the very soon after this movie, they would have, transgender men and women rioting at Stonewall, right? And so I think that what they were trying to depict with Norman was a different entity altogether. Mm-hmm. And it's something that really shows the movie's age in a way that not a lot of other things show the movie's age. We sort of talk about timeless elements in film, and that really even extends to the language that we use in these descriptions. And I believe that it was still considered a part of Psychosis. But this was actually not the first film that used this conceit. There were actually horror movies around the same time that also used this conceit of man dresses up as woman to be able to kill other women. Which this, of course, perpetuates the idea that men are dressing up as women to inflict harm on other women, which is why this type of media is so damaging to the trans community at large, and why there is a lot of pushback against cisgendered actors portraying trans characters in media.
Yeah, so this conversation just kind of reminds me of something that Scarlett Johansson actually said recently, and that she, as an actress, believes that any actor can play any part. So, like for example, a black actor can play the part of a white person.
But Scarlett Johansson, should be that black actor.
Well, I don't think that's what she was saying, but she can say, oh, well, because there's like the whole shake-up in the Marvel universe of having Tilda Swinton playing a traditionally Asian character, and Marvel's whitewashing their cast. So I think that's where that comes from, but also she extended that to be...
That Scarlett Johansson did Ghost in the Shell.
Right. And that's, she's playing, what was it, an android in that, right?
Right.
And she's like, I could play a tree in a movie. It's you could be anything, and that's kind of like the beauty of acting. Mm-hmm. And that relates somewhat to this, in that, obviously Anthony Perkins is not a psychotic cross-dressing, mama's boy. Right. But back to the movie. I think that really the only other things that really date the movie are the actors' accents. It's like you hear them talking, you're like, this is from like the 50s, 60s era. People just don't talk like that anymore.
There's a timelessness about that, about the way that they articulate particular things, because the dialogue in this movie is, I think, really good. None of the dialogue in the movie feels really unnecessary. It all feels very cogent and coherent, and I appreciate that. Until you get to this final scene, which, of course, he's been critiqued over and over and over for this scene. They do such a heavy-handed job making sure that that the person in the gown with the wig and the knife is Norman, based on the way that Norman falls and the dress tears off, and then you see his white shirt and black pants underneath, and the wig comes off, and you're just like, oh, it's Norman. It's like, well, yeah, of course we figured that out by now. The twist is there.
They wait till the 11th hour to introduce the character that has been the killer the whole time.
Right. It's so, it's just like, we know. And so then the ending scene, it feels anticlimactic. That being said, the monologue from the perspective of the mother at the end of the film is so good, and it's so important. The issue with that is, how do you get to that scene without going through the exposition
with the psychiatrist?
Yeah.
Oh, I think that they could have done that pretty easily, because there was that transition from that scene in the office where the psychiatrist is doing his monologue and people are questioning him, and then there's I think one of the police officers, they're like, oh yeah, go give him
he asked for a blanket.
Go give him this blanket. And I feel like if they had just they just showed a policeman walking down the hall and open up the cell. You follow the policeman into the cell, and he gives him the blanket, and then there you go. That's how you get there. You can just cut the rest of that out.
I don't know, because I feel like there is some sort of important element of catharsis for Sam and for Marion's sister, that we get to see them at the end scene too, sort of all safe and sort of back to normal. We get sort of grounded by seeing them again at the police station. I think that you're right, that they don't need the scene. I do think that it would be hard. It might feel forced to have done it any other way. If they had done something where the psychiatrist's sort of diatribe starts, but then bleeds out, they sort of, slowly turn down the volume on him and then bring in the mother's voice over it, because we've seen sort of narrative elements elsewhere in the movie with when Marion is driving her car and such. It could have smoothed out that transition by moving from the discussion of his psychosis directly into the mother's monologue.
I think that's a good idea too, because then that kind of like shows, or that would show, the mother's like domineering presence over everything in the movie. Mm-hmm. But another thing that I thought of that could possibly have been neat was, let's say like they end the movie with like a courtroom scene with Sam and Layla like waiting in the courtroom, waiting to like testify as witnesses. And then you get like the bailiff going to like go get Norman, and then that's when the monologue happens.
Yeah, that would be good too. I think that there are a couple of options. That being said, Alfred Hitchcock made a really great movie, and I don't mean to disparage it in this way because of one scene that could easily be removed in the TMC cut.
Yeah. Well, and the other thing that I think dates this movie a little bit, not to its fault at all, is the kill scene. They didn't have effects back then. So that dates the movie, but there's nothing else they could have done besides just not shown it.
I think that scene is still so visceral, especially because of the music part of it. Mm-hmm. That shower scene music is so iconic as far as film scoring goes, that for me watching it, I was just like, oh yeah, I'm cool with this. This is fine. I can tell that he's not actually stabbing into her, but my suspension of disbelief is still intact, so we're good.
Those strings are doing all the stabbing for him. If there was like onomatopoeias, like mm-hmm. how they're words that sound like the action that happening, that string sound is the onomatopoeia for stabbing.
Yeah, so they call that Mickey Mousing.
Oh yeah, okay.
God damn, does Bernard Herrmann know how to write a score for a horror movie?
Oh yeah.
And I love this one. I would say this and Vertigo are two of my favorite Bernard Herrmann scores.
Oh yeah, I mean, I think most people who know who Bernard Herrmann who knows who Bernard Herrmann is would agree with you. In particular, the soundtrack captures Marion's paranoia over being caught with the money that she stole. Mm-hmm. I feel like it does such a good job with that, because it's the theme that plays like constantly from the moment she leaves town. Constant, intense, and you don't get too many moments from the moment she leaves Phoenix to when she gets to the Bates Motel without mm-hmm. that going on in the background. And it does such a good job with giving you this aura of anxiety. And then after Norman kills her and he's going to get supplies to like clean up after he thinks his mom did it, he's cleaning up after his mom. And there's like a lot more chromaticism in the music then, so you can like mm-hmm. it's definitely more of like a horror movie soundtrack at that point rather than just like
thriller.
Like a thriller.
Yeah, he really rides that line of scoring and knows exactly when to use very specific moments. And I would say even at the beginning with when Marion and Sam are sharing a moment in that hotel room, which I actually figured out why they were sharing a hotel room, and it's because Sam supposedly lives in California and it's a long distance thing. I thought he lived in the same town and that this was sort of an illicit affair, but that's not it at all. But there's a level of lyrical sweetness to all of Bernard Herrmann's writing, and he's able to sort of weave between these sort of calmer moments with these really sinister and thrilling moments so well. And using an all strings ensemble, I think, is really unique for that time. It was actually kind of a departure from either the big and brassy symphonic works that we hear, or what was beginning to be a much more simplistic score culture. And I mean, of course, he's coming off the back of Jerry Goldsmith and Franz Waxman and the big film composers that were writing these really symphonic scores, that to use sort of a woody, rusty sounding string section really made all of those moments so palpable.
And I feel like that's just one of the ways that this film was a pioneer in the film industry at this point in 1960. And I feel like to this day, 60 years later, it remains iconic in the industry. And I think the way the risks that they took is largely what makes it so iconic to this day. It was one of the first films to in-depth depict psychosis. It was the first film to, well, it's not the first film, but it had this unique score to it. It was actually the first film to show a flushing toilet, which I don't know if that was a risk so much as just a uniqueness to it, but it has all these different things. And horror movies back then, I mean, Hitchcock was like the guy for these horror movies. And, you know, other names we talked about before, Mario Bava, you know, the Hammer films,
the Universal.
But those were more focused on specifically Dracula and those more like macabre. What's the word I'm looking for? Like occult kind of horror, rather than this is
folklore.
It's called Psycho.
Really?
Yeah. You get it in the title. It's called Psycho. It's about mental wellness, and like this is a thing that could happen and probably has happened. Not exactly in this way, but I feel like the events of this film really revealed to people at the time, like, oh, this is something that could happen. There are no supernatural elements at play here. Back then, you didn't really know much about the people that you're interacting with. It's not like you could go in like, oh, like, what's your name? Norman Bates? Okay, I'm just going to Google you real quick so that I know that I'm safe at your motel. There's no Google review on the Bates Motel.
This one has 1 star and says that a woman was killed here and that you pushed her car into a swamp.
1 out of
1 out of 5.
But great service. I mean, he held eye contact with me the whole time I was talking to him.
Spooky
He said he was gonna give me a continental breakfast, but he never did because I died.
You know, it is one of those things too. We talk about, you mentioned this being so early in the psychosis sphere. And I wouldn't necessarily say that it was the first, obviously, because you think about films like Harvey, which is where the main character sees a rabbit that he believes is his friend. I think of the movie with Cary Grant, Arsenic and Old Lace, which depicts an element of psychosis in all of them. And they talk very openly, but it's done very comedically, which is very different. And it's supposed to be playing on the stereotype of the psychotic killer always has a very distinct look, and it's typically haggard, or he's sort of grisly or deformed or misshapen. And I think that even goes back to like M, which was the movie about the serial killer from the 1930s. It's German. And they always depicted these killers as being people you would be afraid of running into at any point in time. And then you see this movie with Norman Bates, who is a good-looking, fairly energetic, mid-20s guy. Like, he just looks like a dude that you could get to know and that you could talk to. And it's not until we sort of get to move past the facade of that into the madness that we're like, oh, this person who we assumed to be this highly functioning, you know, prototypical member of society is a psychopath. He's actually truly deranged. And I think that's one of the things that for me makes it also scary, is that he looks like someone that you would want to get to know. And I mean, there is even almost like a little bit of a weird romantic tension between him and Marion early on. And I think it obviously goes through with Marion. We get to see it sort of happen in waves. And it's cool. We get to take the journey with her of she is on the run. She is nervous. She doesn't want to share anything with Norman. And then sort of for a period of time, she like warms up to him. His sort of eccentric way that he's running this cabin is almost endearing, and then all of a sudden things start to go south and they start to feel weird, and we as the audience get to feel weird with her. We get to go on that sort of emotional experience of, all right, this fella don't seem right.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot too that what you just said, in that I feel like Norman is the first man in the film, besides Sam obviously, that Marion actually feels comfortable with, because from, you know, she steals the money, and then she gets harassed by, or actually she steals Tom's money, and Tom's the guy who
Doug Dimmadome of the Dimsdale Dimmadome.
Yeah, he's the one that like basically harasses her while she's at work. He sits on her desk and like just ogles her the entire time, and he's like flashing his money, and
I wear a cowboy hat.
The playground of the world.
Right.
And what's the thing he says? Hot as fresh milk. Oh god, this is disgusting.
Oh, hot as fresh milk. Yeah.
He goes, oh, it's hot as fresh milk out there. That's also the most disgusting
Your
phrase
dad
I've ever
started
heard.
an oil company, and then when he died, you got to take over.
Yeah, Tom seems very like old money kind of attitude.
Yeah.
But anyway, so she gets harassed by Tom in the beginning. She steals Tom's money that she's supposed to deposit at the bank. And then there's that kind of like weird thing between that weird look that Mr. Lowry gives her when she's in her car, like getting out of town.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think that he gives her the weird look because it's just like, weren't you supposed to run to the bank and then go home?
Well, she went home and then she like drove.
Right, but she was supposed to be going. She was supposed to be going to deposit the money in the bank, and then she was going to go home because she had a migraine. And this is several hours later that he is walking by and he sees her, and I think that it's sort of like it's a click moment for him where it's just like, wait, why are you out driving? I thought you were gonna go home. And I think that that's what sort of sparks her paranoia, is that he's concerned immediately. But yeah, she only feels really comfortable with Sam and then briefly with Norman.
Well, because there's also the policeman that stops her and makes her feel uncomfortable because she's acting all weird and he gets suspicious. It just makes sense. But then also there's the used car salesman who she acts like super uncomfortable around, and the first thing he says to her is, "You better not give me trouble."
Right.
He says the first customer of the day is always trouble or something like that.
She's anti-authoritarian. That's what it is. She don't like the people that look like they're in charge.
Yeah. So when she finally gets to the motel and Norman's just like, you know, happy, smiley guy towards her and does not suspect her of anything nefarious, she doesn't see him as a predator, and that contrasts him to every other man in the film. So that makes him seem more trustworthy not only to Marion, but also the audience member. They're like, yeah, this guy's cool. He seems fine.
Right.
Like actually is attentive and not suspicious of our protagonist.
Oh man, there's some great parallelism too when he starts talking about his mother that I didn't actually notice until we watched it, was the way that he talks about sort of the harmlessness of the birds and how his mother was harmless. And it's just like, they're just harmless. And then at the end, the mother, is describing herself as harmless when she's talking about how she wouldn't hurt a fly. And that parallel actually got me thinking a little bit about it. And I have a hot take.
I think I know where you're going with this, but go ahead.
My hot take is that Norman is the bad personality and that the mother is not. And the reason for that is because there's this weird dichotomy where the mother is always claiming to be essentially harmless, and it's sort of paralleled, but everything that we see of Norman is serial killers do, but there's been a connection to, you know, psychopaths killing animals, like that sort of mentality. And in a way, the way he describes his mother as harmless and how she describes herself as harmless, it almost to me feels like the actual psychotic break where he takes on the purpose or that takes on the motherly figure is separate from the murderous identity that he assumes that kills Marion.
Well, okay. So I guess I didn't know where you're going with this, but I think that it's not quite that simple. I think that it is Norman has adopted this warped kind of view of his mother. I think that there is some geneticism to the psychosis because the cop in the area when they're talking to him, he says that Norman's mom killed her boyfriend. She poisoned him and then herself.
But she didn't.
What happened then?
Norman killed them. Norman, seeing his mother starting to move away from him and be with this other man, he poisoned both of them.
Was that ever said explicitly?
Yeah.
Did I miss that?
That's in the psychiatrist rant at the end.
Well, never mind that. But regardless of that fact, I think
that backs me up because that's like, okay, so Norman was murderous because the mother inside of his head is not going to tell him to kill his actual mother.
Well, I don't think that there was a mother in his head before. And I think that what he has come to call the mother half of his personality, and when you hear like the old lady's voice, I think that is just I think that's like the psychosis that's always been there, that he is now given a name because
interesting.
He says that he had like guilt over leaving her alone, even though she's dead. So he's talking to Mary and he goes, oh, if you love someone, you can't leave them unless you like truly hate them. And I thought that was kind of a weird sentence because
which is what his mother was gonna do with him with this other guy, which is why he killed them.
Right. So then he has this guilt even when she's dead over leaving her alone. So it's like he picked up his mom and just put her in his head, and then decided, hey, this personality is where I'm just going to store all my, bad thoughts about women and about what women can do to me, because I do think that
there's something Oedipal about it,
right? And the whole impression that you get of Norman's mother is that she really hates other women and thinks that other women like are going to corrupt Norman or something like that.
Yeah, for sure. I definitely think that that's part of it. And you get that in the fact that the other people that Norman had killed were all women before Marion. So the idea that someone could come along and take Norman away from her is sort of seen as the impetus for why he's acting this way. And then, come to find out that everything was inside of his own head. It then becomes... Right. It becomes a question of morality. Like, he views women who tempt him as sort of the trigger as to when it switches to the mother's side of the brain. And she is wanting to isolate him.
Yeah, and I think that the tell in that it's actually Norman who thinks it about women and not necessarily his mother is that he says to Arbogast, the private investigator, he says, oh, I'm not capable of being fooled by a woman. And that's it's definitely not the mother side of his brain that's doing that. It's not like he's parroting something that his mother told him one time. And the fact that he is still so stunted in maturity, like he still has toys in his room, like it looks like a little boy's room. And he eats, like, when he invites Marion to have dinner with him.
Sandwiches and milk, baby.
Sandwiches and milk. That is the dinner of a child who, cannot fend for themselves. I'm a kid. This is what I eat for my meals. Okay, because I'm a picky child.
Listen, sometimes milk is just delicious, and also all you have is lots of sandwich materials, and you want to use the bread before it gets moldy.
I mean, yeah, I get that.
Okay, I'm not defensive.
Okay, let's keep rolling here.
Yeah, no.
So the sandwiches and the milk, the sandwiches and the milk, the toys in his room, he obviously stunted, and then the whole thing, a boy's best friend is his mother. I think that Norman was far more into his mother than she was into him.
But I think that that's because he didn't have a father figure, and that's the whole part of it is that he created this false attachment to her, and another man trying to take her away from him was what caused him to snap. And I think that, there's this underlying part of him, Norman, that believes that these women that come to the motel, they could be his future wife. And if they became his future wife, then they might want to move. they might want to leave the hotel, which would leave his mother behind, which is something that he is unwilling to do, which is why it's him that is killing them. I don't think that the mother part of it really has anything to do with Norman's biological mother. I think that was the thing that I was going for when I was talking about this earlier, is that it's Norman and Norman's personality that is the bad one, and the mother one is just sort of the eccentric.
Gotcha. So that's the authority.
Right, exactly.
Figure.
Yeah. That's the part of his brain that is telling him, the child part of him, to not succumb to these women's temptations and to murder them to do so.
This sounds like really far-fetched the way that we say it, but this is totally like, this is the kind of thing that Hitchcock would have like come up with.
Right, yeah. He was doing that stuff, and I mean, he's so good at framing those elements in the actual film that it's reasonable to believe that. And there is something about the way that it was changed from Bloch's original story, because in the original version, the actual physical description of Norman Bates is so wildly different. He's in the story.
Is he like hideous?
he's 1950s hideous, so he's short, he's fat, and he's not likable. So, but you know what? I never killed anybody, so that's not.
Yeah, and that's.
Ooh,
so
no laughter at my good self burn.
Sorry, what?
Ooh. I said no laughter at my good self
I didn't
burn.
even. God damn it, Matt.
So, but that's, he's not the charismatic, youthful, energetic guy that we get to see in the film. And so it almost makes, as terrible as this sounds, it makes more sense for Book Norman to be a psychopath.
Well, there's something wrong with the statement that it makes sense that someone would be a psychopath, because it never truly makes sense.
Right.
That's what makes them.
You know what
apt.
I mean, though.
Yeah, I know what you mean. I'm just saying it's not so predictable, and we know that now. But in 1960, I know exactly what you mean.
Yeah, it was the ugly ones that were doing it.
Right, and what I like about this portrayal of Norman is that he is likable. It's kind of like, Ted Bundy. You have these stories like Ted Bundy was just like attractive, not only in looks, but also in character. Mm-hmm. He's this attractive guy, and like that's just how it works sometimes.
And they got Zac Efron to play him.
Right. And then what also I like is that a lot of movies, especially more modern movies that feature serial killers, they kind of make the serial killers out to be like completely unflappable, and like they're just these cold, logical, like almost undefeatable characters. Mm-hmm. And they really don't have, at first when the PI is investigating Norman, he's questioning him, Norman has this really like cool, laid back, like I don't have to be worried about this guy kind of like attitude about it. But then really quickly he starts stuttering and like getting all sweaty over where Arbogast is like going with his questions. And so it's not that typical kind of serial killer characteristic that we're used to seeing nowadays.
Yeah, he cracks him. You're totally right.
Yeah.
There's something sort of...
And that's realistic.
Yeah, there's something sort of realistic about the way that he actually breaks the facade of confidence. Because, I mean, look at the remake, quote unquote, that they did of this with Christian Bale in American Psycho. I mean, everything that they do with Christian Bale in that movie is emotionless to the point of robotic in a way. They sort of shield everything about him behind this artifice of complete and utter lack of empathy, lack of emotion, lack of feeling, which I think it dehumanizes them in a way that is simultaneously comforting and simultaneously disquieting, because when we see people like that, we're like, I am going to stay far away from that person because something feels off about them. There's an uncanny valley effect going on with a living, breathing, actual person. And that, in a way, is comforting to us as an audience member because we get to see that and we would be like, oh, I know that I wouldn't go around this person, so I wouldn't have anything to worry about. And on the opposite side of this, it's terrifying because when you see people like that, you're like, oh my God, they live among us.
And you can also, what's comforting about it is that you can also dissociate from their lack of humanity.
Right.
But that's just not realistic.
And Norman is like, ooh, he's an everyman. He is like a person you know, like Ted Bundy.
Yeah, and that's, like, have you seen, I think we talked about this, but have you seen Bates Motel?
I've seen a couple of the episodes of it. I haven't seen the whole thing.
Yeah, the TV series Bates Motel. I watched, I think, the first 2 seasons of it, and they definitely make teenage Norman Bates out to be this, like, really, like, he does have emotions, but it's mostly like anger and sadness and not much else. And it's very, like, logical, very cold kind of character that just doesn't feel like Norman Bates from Psycho.
Sometimes they don't need to resurface these IPs. Let it die. Let it go down gloriously rather than in garbage. That being said, I think American Psycho is a pretty damn good movie.
Oh yeah, so we were planning on doing the rest of November. We were planning on doing Psycho this week, Psycho 2 next week, and then Psycho 3 the last week of November. Should we just change that to all Hitchcock films? Or
Yes, we should. We should do The Birds next week.
I'll get back to you on that. We'll talk about that off air. But speaking of The Birds, or are you just setting me up for this segue? You mentioned The Birds earlier, and that what they have to do with Norman's mother. Mm-hmm. Norman also says that Marion eats like a bird. And
such a weird pickup line.
Yeah, that's when they're in the office, like surrounding, or they're in the office and they're eating and they're surrounded by those stuffed birds. And
watched.
they mostly show the birds of prey. There's like an eagle and like falcon. And
I swear to God, Zach, if you play me bird sounds and ask me to identify these birds, I will strangle you.
You know, that's close, but that's not what I'm going to tell you. I'm not that mean. You're really close, though. But he says she eats like a bird, and her last name is Crane.
Right.
So, and that's her real last name. And then that's the whole thing is, I think she like kind of points that out. I don't remember how her last name comes up, but he's like, oh, what's your last name again? She goes, oh, Crane. And that's, of course, different than the fake name that she signed on her like sign in for the motel. So like he starts getting suspicious of her for some reason. Even though don't
she's
think he cares about the
15
money
minutes
at all.
away from where her lover is staying.
Right.
Just go to his house.
No, wait, it was like an hour or two.
No,
right?
it was 15 minutes. When she goes into the thing and she asks how far away is Fairfax, California. Norman says, oh, it's about 15 minutes up the road.
That's also like, yeah, she's like a criminal on the run, and she's gonna like
stop at a motel.
She's gonna basically create witnesses against her case.
All right.
That's
back to what you were saying.
Kind of a plot hole. I was just mentioning that it's kind of fun that her last name is Crane, and with the birds. And I wonder if like the whole birds of prey thing is supposed to be scary, or if they're supposed to be like kind of foreshadowing that Marion is about to be prey.
I do think that is the thing. I also think that there is an element of voyeurism, of having things watching Marion and Norman in this room, because there's something that's sort of unsettling about feeling like these creatures are all surrounding you and just watching, and they're dead things. And to me, it sort of leads into Norman removing the painting and then watching her through the hole in the wall.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that makes sense. One more thing that I have, and that is something that you said earlier. You said that there was like Norman suddenly shifted when talking to Marion when they're having dinner. And I think that shift happens when Marion kind of suggests that Norman should put his mother in a madhouse.
Yeah.
And he gets all offended because, as we've discussed, his mother is in his mind.
Yeah.
It's part of his mind. And she has kind of suggested that, oh, you're a little crazy. And it's the implication that he might be psychotic is kind of what induces the psychosis in this case. And he describes this madhouse, this hypothetical madhouse, in detail, and it's almost as if we're supposed to like get the impression that he's been in a madhouse before.
Yeah. That's the trigger. It's the idea of separation, because if he put his mother in a madhouse, then they would be separated. And I think that that's part of it too, is that one, Marion's calling him out. She's just like, you're crazy. And at the same time, it would be a separation from his mother figure, because if he does go to a madhouse and they cure him, his mother is gone. She is dead. And so then he would lose her permanently. And he would lose the version of her that he has been able to sort of keep contained in his head.
Gotcha. So you're saying that if there's that separation, if that separation were to happen, he's kind of afraid of it, because then that just leaves him with himself.
Right.
And that is kind of the psychosis side of things, or psychotic side of his mind.
That's totally what I was reading it as. I wasn't necessarily reading it as like the idea of him being mad as the thing that sets it off. I think it's the idea of him being separated from his mother. And I think that that's why because Arbogast never accuses him of being crazy. But there's that same sort of flip with Arbogast, where he all of a sudden switches to be a little bit more aggressive and potent.
What it is though, there is an implication, because there is when Arbogast is asking, he asked him something,
and then
he
about
says,
the mother. He wants to go talk to the mom.
Well, there's that, but also he is questioning him. He asked him a question, and he goes, "Are you willing to commit yourself?" And he's asking him if he's willing to commit himself to the answer to that question. But the phrase, as we know today, committing yourself is, checking yourself into a psychiatric facility. And, Norman goes, "Commit myself." And you can tell, like, he starts getting a little more aggressive from there on out. So I think that there is that kind of implication there.
It's honestly probably both. I would say that those two things are tied together that way. And they are intended to be that closely knit, that the separation of his mother and his own insanity are two halves of the same whole thing.
Right. And that's kind of the whole thing in the end, when he's only speaking in his mother's voice when he's in that cell at the end, is that it's implying that he's more unhinged and more lost in his own mind.
And that's why the mother's skull superimposes over his face. Although the psychiatrist does say that the mother has taken full control. And to that I say, no.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, I guess the implication is, I guess we'd have to watch Psycho 2 to find out.
Yeah, Psycho 2, yeah. With Norma Bates.
Norma Bates.
That's the mom's name. The mom's named Norma Bates.
Oh, I didn't even know that.
And what's your son's name? Norman Bates. Whoa.
Maybe that's where he originally got the idea that she was, like, all about him.
Yeah.
It's mini-me.
It's a mini-me. And then, Norma, as in mother, and Norman, the boy version.
Ooh. That's, there's something to that.
I just made that up myself right this very minute, so.
That could be why they chose those names.
Very, very possible, very possible.
If that's why, it takes a lot of like detour route to get there, but it works.
It absolutely works. Whether or not it has anything to do with it is entirely questionable. But if I was able to come up with something like that, I'm sure that they're able to.
All right.
It's not so superficial.
Are you ready for this mystery game?
I am. Let's do it.
Okay. So this is a game that I'm choosing to call Psyched for Sounds. And it's probably exactly what you're thinking. I'm going to play some sound effects that are from the movie.
Okay.
And I want you to tell me what's happening on screen based off of that sound.
Oh, okay.
And I don't have like the source audio, obviously, of the movie, so you will hear some of the soundtrack going on.
Uh-huh.
And you having the mind that you have, I just want you to try to ignore that.
Okay.
Because knowing you, you're going to be able to place it because of the soundtrack.
Okay.
So, all right, here's the first one. All right, that's it.
Okay, that is Arbogast dialing the phone to call Sam and Marion's sister.
Very good. That was. Oh, by the way, these increase in difficulty. So that was exactly what it was. Good job. All right, here's the next one. And that's it.
Is that when Norman hits Sam over the head with the like thing on the side table?
Yep, that's
Yes!
it. Good job. That's 2 for 5. Or no, wait. Yeah, 2 for 5. We have 5 of these. All right.
Oh, I like
and now
this game.
Here's the third. Yeah, this is a good one. I thought it was pretty clever. All right, so here is number 3. This is a bit of a longer one.
That's her shoving money into the envelope and then into her purse.
I'll give it to you. It's actually her unpacking the money. It's when she's wrapping it in the newspaper. So she's taking it out of the envelope and then she's putting it in the newspaper.
Right. Okay.
To then hide it. So I'll give it to you though because you basically got it.
I knew that it was the money and that she was getting the money out and putting it in paper.
All right, 3 out of 5. Good job. Good luck on these last 2.
Oh, God. Okay. Okay.
All right, here we go.
Okay, so car driving and some sort of knocking. My instinct is that it's her walking up to the car dealership.
Okay, so that's the closer one. Which makes me almost want to give it to you. Because it's actually her walking into her office. So she opens the door to her office, and that's when you hear the car go by outside, and then she's walking across the floor.
Yeah, don't give me that one.
With her heels.
But I knew it was her heels, so I'm proud of that.
Okay, so 3 out of 5.
I know the sound of high heels on a hardwood floor.
1 to go. Yeah, that's.
They keep coming back for more. It's a party tonight.
All right, here is the last one.
All right. All right, the shoes were bigger. So it's either Norman, Sam, or Arbogast. Is it them walking up after the car had been pulled from the swamp? No bodies.
I mean,
no bodies, sir. We'll find it.
You're close.
Is it them walking in the precinct?
No, they're at the motel.
They're at the motel.
This one was tough. I realized after the fact that this one could have been placed at a couple of different spots in the movie, but the fact that this didn't have any soundtrack behind it, I thought
made it really hard. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, a little more notable. It's actually when Layla and Sam are checking into the motel, like they're acting as if they're a couple, and
he says,
Norman is like, "I'll show you to your room," and then they're like, "No, we'll figure it out ourselves," and they're walking down the porch.
Got it. I could tell that they were heavier footsteps, so I was almost sure that it was Sam's footsteps.
Do you want one more like super impossible one?
Sure.
All right, so I figured this one would just be for fun. That was it.
What?
I told you it's impossible.
Okay, give me a hot second. Okay, give me a second. Okay.
I can also give you a hint if you want.
No. Give me a second. So it's late. It's later into the movie. It's not early.
You're right about that.
Is it while Sam and Layla are waiting for Arbogast's call?
No.
Okay.
It's actually much later than that. Even.
Oh, wow.
It's when Layla is she opens Mrs. Bates' wardrobe.
Oh.
So I just thought that was like a kind of an interesting sound.
Yeah, I don't think I would have got that one.
No, I realized after the fact. I'm like, there's no way. There's no way. It's just.
I'm proud of the ones that I got before that, though. So
I mean, I'm gonna go ahead and give you a 4 out of 5 because I'm so surprised, or I'm not so surprised. I'm so impressed that you were able to get the ones that you got so quickly.
Thank you.
And you basically got that 5th one.
I definitely relied on the soundtrack for part of it. I was like,
so that's Psyched for Sounds.
Thanks for listening to this week's episode of Watch No Evil. This is Matt.
And this is Zach.
And we'll catch you next week.